Hello, here we are again with Muki Tenenbaum, exploring his disillusionist philosophy. We are conducting now an exercise through a series of videos to see if we understand his misalgic theory. Bottom line of this theory, as we have seen, is that most of what we do as human beings consists in somehow trying to run away from suffering. What I want to ask you now is, why is it that we do not feel we are running away from? How come? We live life not as if we were running away from suffering all the time, even if that's what we do, as you have proven.
Well, I would say we don't remember living in that way. I wouldn't say we are not living in that way. I think it has to do with memory, and this has to do with you see, we are. I would say a sentence that may be a bit confusing, but we inhabit a narrative, our own narrative. When I mean own, it doesn't mean that I made my narrative. I mean that I own it. Okay, so that I say I inhabit it. It's in me, but it is the way I see reality. Me, you, and everybody else, of course. All humans have a certain amount of interpretation of reality that has been, I would say, translated into a narrative. And that narrative is such that, like in almost everything else that we have while we live, we are not aware of, we are not conscious of. We don't think it's a narrative. We think it is reality. And how do I know it's narrative? Now, to understand this narrative and how it's composed, I have to go back to the main issue of disillusionism, my main theory, because those are the illusions. Illusions, I explain, are certain facts, certain physical facts, to which a certain meaning has been ascribed, and then it's an enmeshment between the meaning, which is a fictional thing, and those real facts. So I gave the example of the state as an illusion, and there are buildings, of course, in a state, and there are flags, and there are uniforms, and there are medals, and there are passports, you know, all the things we know about the state. And of course, there is people with guns, yes, that go around with guns, and they go officially. The official is part of the uniform, the gun, yes. So this is the state for us. But the real thing is that these things, if you take out the meaning of state, it's a building is a building, a flag is just a piece of fabric flapping in the wind somewhere, yes, and the uniform is just another kind of garment with a different kind of color or the same kind of color. It has no. So if tomorrow you have an attack of amnesia, you won't have a state, but the buildings are there. So the amnesia will separate, yes, between those meanings of the thing of the objects and the objects themselves. Yes, this is. In narrative happens exactly the same. We are certain facts, and we add meaning to them. We are adding a certain story to it to make it understand. Now, what is a narrative? A narrative, like any narrative, will have a relationship that goes in which there is past, present, and future. There is cause and effect. That's how a narrative is being built, and it's being built naturally because we live in a world of cause and effect. So we create a story that is for us. The story is for us without knowing we're doing it. Now, the basis of this narrative is that you don't know you have a narrative. If you know that a certain part of your thought are narratives, the narrative is gone. The light, your own eyes, your eyesight, to call it somehow, your conscious, your realization breaks that narrative. But you never get to there. You say you never ever break your own narrative. You're not there. But somebody else can. Somebody else can come and tell you that what you're saying is fictitious and even prove it to you. Now, then you have a broken narrative. Now, when you go, what happens when you have a broken car? You go to the car dealership or to the mechanic, and he will fix your car. You do the same when your narrative is broken. You go to a psychologist, you go to a priest, you go to a friend, and they will help you fix that narrative and either make a piece of a new one, you know, like a spare part, or just a new one, which is very unusual. Normally you mend it, you fix it. If your narrative is broken, you have a problem. So you don't look at the narrative. But moreover, since everybody has a narrative, I will afraid of my narrative being attacked or being the wholeness of my narrative will be in danger, then I will not touch anybody else's narrative because I will be afraid that he will do that to me without me knowing that. It's not a decision. It's not that I decide not to break. That's the way we behave. We, tiptoe around certain things because they are narrative and you just don't touch it. If somebody tells me, the other day I went to church and you said, why would you go to that building? It has no meaning. This is a stupid thing. You're talking to yourself in the church. You don't do that because they will come to you and get into some of your part of your narrative in which you say you love your wife, you don't love your wife, you love your wife, you just accustomed. You are. It's a habit of you to live, living with your wife. These kind of things are dangerous. So in our relationships, we're keeping away of each other's narrative. So this is the narrative. Without the narrative, we are in trouble. Now, what is the narrative used today? Why do we need a narrative? In general, it has to do with guilt. It has to do with our moral conscience. So we have to do certain things that normally will be objectionally, morally, but we have a narrative to cover them. So I kill people, but I do it in the name of the state, or in the name of Islam, or in the name of my son because he was killed, or as vengeance. It doesn't matter. But the narrative will cover certain things that normally our moral conscience will not allow us.
What's happening to this narrative we live in, each of us lives in, during the current pandemic of COVID-19?
Well, the narratives of all of us, again, narratives, people are not Jules Verne. They don't invent narratives. They normally copy it from somebody else, okay? Could be your church, could be your parents, could be a friend, could be an older brother. You don't invent your narrative. You just copy and you make it from others. Most narratives are very similar to each other, of course, because there's almost no creativity in these narratives. So now suddenly we were hit with the pandemic, and it took us some time. The reason we were so late in dealing with it, most countries, did not move enough time. Of course, there are objective or semi-objective reasons, but I suspect part has to do with the narrative. It didn't fit our narrative. It's a threat to our narrative. So it took us some time, but then once facts, because the worst thing that can happen to a narrative is a fact in front of it that exactly contradicts it, and a fact will win, of course. So now you have to change your narrative to adapt to yourself to your new fact. There is a pandemic, there is a danger, we have to stay at home, blah, 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 blah. And now we have our own narrative, yes? Careful, because I think the best example is the euphoria you see in the markets now. There's euphoria, everybody, nobody talks anymore about the fact that there is more chance that there will be no vaccine than there will be a vaccine. Nobody talks about it anymore because it affects the narrative. So now we're building a new narrative, preparing ourselves to the post-pandemic. They want us to have a certain narrative, yes? They're giving us the facts to enmesh them with the fictional part, so we can make our new narratives. So we are in the process of creating a new one, while we are in the midst of a third one. The first narrative before you went in, the second now, and the third that comes.
What do you think will be in it, this third narrative after the pandemic?
Wow. First of all, I think we'll have different narratives in different cases. First of all, cultures have different narratives, kind of narratives. And a narrative of a Japanese guy is going to be like his people. Culture means those. I venture to say that the culture is really the expression of the different narratives that exist in the place of the culture, when the culture rules. Yes, so it's not culture is really I would say a short a short version or the general principles of the other's narrative. What will happen probably is the narrative will be in threat for a very long time, because to have a good narrative, it has to withstand a lot of pain. So we will see a lot of narratives being broken. People who have no work will be a problem with their narratives. People who lost family in the narratives. There is the whole hero things. Yes, all the people who work in hospitals, they are heroes, they should be medals, and they're already handing them medals and hero. And I would no, this is part of your narrative. So now you see a doctor, you see a hero. Yes, even though maybe the guy is a bastard and he lets his dog defecate on the sidewalk and not pick it up. Doesn't matter. I mean, doesn't matter. But that's what's going to happen. It's going to be very interesting. Narratives are going to be and we will see which are the ones that survive this process, not now, but in the next 2-3 years, especially if there is no vaccine. That's going to be very interesting.
Very well, we shall see. Thank you very much. We'll carry on.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.